Hello, and welcome to Beering in Mind Beer Reviews. Today we're going to take a trip to San Francisco, and we're going to look at a kind of iconic beer from that region, and actually a kind of, I don't really like the word iconic, maybe an originator, a beer that probably represents the very beginning of craft beer in the U.S. here, and that is this one. It's called Anchor Steam Beer by the Anchor Beer Company in the United States, in San Francisco. And this beer first came out in 1971 in the United States, and this is, of course, before, or the modern bottling of it, before almost any craft beer was going in the United States. The craft beer typically is associated with Albion Brewing Company in California in the very early mid-70s, perhaps. And steam beer, the name is kind of unusual. Now it's often called California Common or / steam beer. And this beer was first brewed on the west coast of the United States in San Francisco in the 1870s, 80s. And it was formulated as a lager, but fermented at ale temperatures because they simply did not have enough ice for cooling in San Francisco at that time. And so it was fermented on rooftops in very shallow fermenters without ice, without cooling. And on foggy, cool nights in San Francisco, the rooftops could be seen steaming with the warm beer cooling. And apparently from this, the name steam beer caught on. It's also, it employs a technique called krausening, in which some very active fermenting wort is added to the fully fermented wort to produce a kind of cleaner beer in times when it was perhaps difficult to get that clean quality of beer. And also this putting the active wort into the beer will allow it to ferment naturally, and to carbonate naturally, to provide nice natural carbonation. I used to drink this, in fact, in the mid-1970s. I was in San Francisco in the late 70s and early 80s, and it was around quite a bit then, and it was quite a different beer for us in those days because it just had a richness of flavor that was so different from typical mass market beers of that time. And this beer also features in some of the literature of the United States, and in fact, I was recently rereading some novels by Frank Norris, including McTeague, which I read when I was in college. And Norris was is associated with San Francisco. His novels, the first two, Van Dover and the Brute and The Octopus, are both set in San Francisco. And The Octopus, which is a kind of what we call a early muckraking piece of fiction about the struggles between the wheat farmers in California at that time and the railroad companies, which are trying to get very low prices for the wheat and ship it cheaply. Norris died quite young. I think he was 34, 35 when he died. But let's get back to the story here. Steam beer features on the very first page of the novel McTeague. And in fact, the narrator drinks steam beer. This is from the first paragraph of the first chapter of McTeague. It was Sunday, and according to his custom on that day, McTeague took his dinner at 2 in the afternoon at the car conductor's coffee joint on Polk Street. He had a thick gray soup, heavy underdone meat, very hot, on a cold plate, 2 kinds of vegetables, and a sort of suet pudding full of strong butter and sugar. On his way back to his office, 1 block above, he stopped at Joe Frenna's saloon and bought a pitcher of steam beer. It was his habit to leave the pitcher there on his way to dinner. So I think a pitcher of beer costs something like 25 cents. And in any case, McTeague goes back to every Sunday, goes back to his office. He's a dentist, and drinks his steam beer and falls asleep in the dental chair. It also appears later on in the novel when he and his wife kind of fall on hard times, and his wife has tried to brought him up to slightly higher habits, and so he's become accustomed to drinking bottled beer rather than steam beer, which was apparently served in pitchers or buckets, and they don't have enough money, and he's asking her for money for bottled beer, and she says, "No, here's a nickel. Go get yourself a steam beer." And he says, "I don't want steam beer." He's accustomed to better quality beer. So basically, the idea was that steam beer is a working man's drink and not of the best quality by far. In any case, Anchor Steam Beer. This beer has 4,859 ratings on Rate Beer, an average rating of 3.36, and a 61 percentile out of 100 for all beers, and 92 percentile for its style, which is California Common or Steam Beer. And let's give this a go, shall we? This is imported to Japan, and I'm not sure how well they keep it in condition while it's traveling, whether it's shipped over in a refrigerated container or not. Okay, so this pours out very deep copper amber color. It's very pretty in the light. Nice compact one finger of foam, and carbonation is not readily apparent here. Oh, yes it is. Yes it is. There we go. Okay, so the head is diminishing slightly, somewhat off-white. So this has a very rich, fruity nose. Some kind of herbs, caramel or toffee, maybe light raisin. Very interesting fruity scent. Somewhat reminiscent of something like Bass Pale Ale. And again, this is a lager beer, but it's fermented at ale temperature, so at a higher temperature than a lager beer would be fermented at. Very malty initial, kind of light citrus bittering. I think this contains Cascade, I'm not sure. The bittering actually does come on kind of quick and rough in mid-palate. It really kind of hits you in the back of the mouth. Kind of spicy. A little bit piney in the finish, and that would not be Cascade. The body is medium, very pleasant mouthfeel. This is very pleasant, very easy drinking beer. Anchor has been bought out by Sapporo, Japanese major brewing company. As far as I can tell, Sapporo has not been tinkering around with the brewing process. I think it's purely a business transaction. Japanese breweries tend to be pretty careful with the acquisitions they make, and they are making a lot of acquisitions these days in Europe, Australia, and now we see in America with Anchor Steam Beer. But they tend to leave them alone and let them do what they do well. So this inside of the cap says 1965, which apparently when Fritz Maytag, the founder of Anchor, bought the company in the old spaghetti factory, still there. Yeah, you can take a nice tour of Anchor when you are visiting San Francisco, and of course you can drink Anchor steam beer there. It's impossible to say, how good this was when it came out and how different it was from the mass market beers that we were accustomed to. Again, Anchor steam beer. You'll find this probably in most stores around the U.S. And around the world, perhaps. Give it a try, okay? And please let me know what you think, and send me a comment. I will reply. And next video, we'll also look at another Anchor beer company beer. Take care. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.